to the most wonderful time of the year. What a weekend we have ahead here, not to mention the undefeated Terps taking on Purdue at 3:30 down at Byrd Stadium on Saturday, and of course on Sunday at 1 o'clock, the undefeated Baltimore Ravens taking on the Oakland Raiders. Dare I say prosperity is, I smell it. It's in the air everywhere, and the Orioles go to Toronto, take care of business, and just the way we drew it up, Luke Jones, Ubaldo Jimenez as the ace in late September of 2016. We knew this when we signed him, right?
Yeah, sure.
He's a number one.
I'll say this.
I remember the other number one we used to give him. Remember that one?
Yeah, well, I never did that from a personal standpoint.
Many did.
From a pitching standpoint, I can certainly understand people feeling that way.
Many did.
But I'll say this, and I tweeted this at WNST at some point, maybe the fifth inning of Thursday night's game. It doesn't forgive all the bad times, and we know there have been plenty of them in Ubaldo Jimenez's tenure here in Baltimore.
Indeed.
But where would they be without him over the last 5 weeks? You consider Chris Tillman with the shoulder issue, and
Wade Miley. He was going to be their savior.
Remember that? Not being as good over the last month. Ubaldo Jimenez over his last 7 starts. He has just been terrific for them. He has been an absolute godsend for them, and he was terrific once again on Thursday night. Gives up a leadoff hit and didn't give up another hit the rest of the way. Walked a few. Certainly had some deep counts. There's no doubt about that. That's one reason.
But he pitched, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was pitching in
pitched
situations. He wasn't throwing, just hoping that the umpire yelled strike or something, right?
Right. He pitched a whale of a game.
Command would be the word, right? Command.
Yeah. Better command. Certainly, you'd rather not pitch to quite as many deep counts.
Dude, there's a little part of him being wild that's not such a bad thing.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. You also don't want to throw pitches right down the middle either. So, we've talked about this at a couple different points. That's a Toronto lineup that, as talented as it is, they've really struggled to swing the bats in the month of September, and it's a big reason why they fell out of first place, and they found themselves in a position very much like the Orioles, looking up at the Boston Red Sox. So, Jimenez takes full advantage of that, pitches exceptionally well, and the Orioles, it wasn't an offensive explosion, but you definitely got a sense that, or at least I thought so anyway, it's a little more of a spring in their step. Even just go back to the final run they scored, Mark Trumbo taking an extra base on what certainly didn't look like was going to be a double. So, it was just a good performance all the way around. They didn't hit any home runs, which, you score 4 runs without a homer these days for this offense. You'll take that gladly. But the story of the night was Jimenez and just doing a terrific job. You wanted to build on what happened on Wednesday night with Kim hitting the dramatic home run, and the Orioles did just that. And, let's give this club some credit. It was ugly in that Boston series.
Several times it's been ugly, but certainly the Red Sox series was like low ebb. The Orioles single-handedly put them in first place. Literally, right? Just let them run away.
Well, they single-handedly allowed them to pull away. They were already in first place, but they completely, they pulled away from the rest of the pack and made it, they made the last week meaningless in terms of the division. So, but the Orioles dust themselves off. They win 3 in a row against Arizona, which I get it, last place team, but you still need to win 3 in a row, and they did that. And they've now won 5 of their last 6 going into the last weekend of the series. They have answered the bell, and and this is the one thing that's a pet peeve of mine. We always want to equate results with effort. And I've heard people say, "Well, the Orioles aren't trying; they're going through the motions," all that. Look,
that's just dumb. Anybody that that's stupid fan talk. The guys aren't trying. Come on.
People are frustrated and they're looking for an explanation, and that's not
frustrated and saying stupid things like they're not trying that's absurd. You can levy a lot of charges on them, but not trying for the ball player. Maybe for the owner trying to make money instead. I'll hear that. I've witnessed that. Making money is one thing, but these guys want to win a World Series. That's the whole reason they get together and do all this for 8 months and lock themselves in a room. So, the effort wasn't the issue. The issue is, patience and looking at counts and evaluating pitchers and listening to their coaches. And the coaches aren't saying swing at pitches in the dirt. That's for sure.
Sure. And you almost wonder with some of these guys if it's a case of trying easier. And what I mean by that is not trying less. It's just, these guys, they hit the home run. We know that.
Whose quote was that? That's a famous manager or coach quote. Try easier. Who coined that one? Somebody.
Oh, there have been plenty of coaches. I know Scott McGregor recently said that to Wade Miley before he went out and almost threw a complete game shutout against Arizona last weekend.
When I Google it, the first thing that comes up is why we should all try easier, not harder, in our yoga practice.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's what Google says about it.
Factor to that. But when you have a club that's built around hitting home runs, but clearly showed in the first half that they could do more than that. You get to a point where you start pressing and you're trying to hit a 5-run homer with no one on base. You're trying to hit a home run on the first pitch. You're not trying to work counts in the way that Hyun-Soo Kim was able to work a count in the 9th inning on Wednesday night. You get away from those types of things. I'm not saying the Orioles will get back to all that completely, but for one night anyway, it looked better at the plate, and you could really tell that home run on Wednesday night, not only winning the game and potentially saving their season.
Wake up call.
As much as I don't like the momentum thing in baseball because I think it rarely applies, Matt Wieters said after the game on Thursday night that when you get into this spot where you're playing day to day, where you're living and dying because you know that one loss could be the difference between making the playoffs and going home, then he said momentum might carry over a little bit more. And I think the Orioles played that way on Thursday night. It was really good to see that. But Buck Showalter famously says over and over, anyone who covers this team, I've probably heard it 50 times at some point this season, that momentum is as good as your next day's starting pitcher, and Ubaldo Jimenez was just that.
Well, I got the quote here, and I just shared it out on our social media. Whatever happened to me in the past, I don't even think about that. If you get stuck in the past, you're not going to be able to move on. Whether it's good or bad, you have to find a way to look forward. That's Ubaldo Jimenez's post-game quote, as read on the AP and WNST, and Ian Harrison of the Associated Press in Toronto quotes that. So, I guess that's a good life lesson. Look, the announcers, and sitting here listening to Bordick talk about Jimenez and what a great guy he is, and I know you've spent a little time in the clubhouse with him, and all that aside, he hasn't been a very good pitcher, but we know there's a very good pitcher in there somewhere, and his potential, as Brian Billick would always say, is going to get somebody fired, but his potential could also make him Trent Dilfer this month, right?
It could.
It could.
It could. I mean,
if he had to take the ball Tuesday night, at this point, if you lose because of him, I'd say, well, all right, but at least he got you there. I'm with you. When I look back on all of this, you'll look at the Kims and Jimenez's and the maligned players. You're not saying they've won because Manny Machado has come up large or because Chris Davis. Now, days and weeks ahead, I mean, hey, 3 games this weekend. They need to win 2 of them, right? I mean, 2 of them, they're good. They have Detroit needs to win 4 if the Orioles win 2 and the Blue Jays win 2. The Blue Jays got to get on a plane to go to Boston. The Orioles are in New York. This is a wild, wild weekend of baseball, as much as any weekend I can ever remember where they're on the cusp of making it or not making it, but trending toward making it if they do the right thing.
Yeah, they have to play good baseball this weekend. There's no doubt about that. The interesting thing, and you mentioned already Detroit needing to win 4, they had their game with Cleveland postponed on Thursday. They will now play Monday if necessary, and I don't know if you've looked at the forecast for the Bronx this weekend, Nestor, but it doesn't look very good. So, I mean, there's a lot of rain in the forecast, so that is kind of the wild card of the wild card race right now.
Well, it could be a doubleheader on Sunday. They could always push. The reason that they had trouble on Thursday is because they had a new series beginning on Friday, so they couldn't make it up. The only day they can make it up is Monday. The whole thing could wind up getting pushed back, right? I mean, especially if there's a 3-way.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, if you have a case where, let's just say hypothetically speaking, there's at least one postponement this weekend where the Orioles have to play a doubleheader, whether it's Sunday or what. If that trickles into Monday, and then you have Detroit, and let's say that those 2 teams tie, and then they have to play a 1-game playoff, which the Orioles won the season series, that would be in Baltimore, and then the wild card game gets. I mean, there could be some chaos here.
By the way, 70% rain on Friday. high of 63 and winds of 21 miles an hour in New York. So it's very tropical. Saturday, 40% chance of rain. Sunday, 30% chance of rain.
So it's actually gotten a little bit better because checking it on Thursday during the day because I wasn't really paying attention to the weather in the Bronx. I've been following the weather here to see what it'd be like for the Ravens and Oakland on
I got
Sunday.
Maritime Magic on Friday night with the Living Classrooms Foundation, man. I need sunshine.
Yeah, but it is amazing though. Getting back to your original point about how it's coming down to the final weekend here. I mean, the Orioles weren't involved from a standpoint of being in the race. But you think back at 2011.
By the way, I'm laughing because I'm looking at the Boston forecast. So, 59 and 90% chance of rain. So, So, all of these games are a mess this weekend on top of them, the race being a mess, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just things could get very interesting from a scheduling standpoint. But, for the Orioles, it's very clear. You're going into the Bronx. You're playing a Yankees team that was officially eliminated on Thursday. They weren't going to make it, but they have mathematically been eliminated at this point, so they are exclusively in the spoilers role. You look at Toronto, they're going to Boston. The Red Sox, they're still something to play for in terms of home field advantage.
Well, they haven't been good this week, right? I mean, they had a chance to be the number one overall, and that is now sort of fleeting. I mean, maybe by Sunday, assuming they get these games in, Boston won't have much to play for.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, you'd like to be the higher seed over Cleveland, though.
Well, right, Cleveland's on their tail. I hear that.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's not one of those things where you compromise your pitching staff, but at the same time, you're not going to you're not just going to roll over either. So that'll be interesting in terms of the Blue Jays. In terms of we know the Orioles are tied right now for the top wild card, but keep in mind they need to be ahead of Toronto because Toronto did win the season series. So. That's a little factor there, but one point that we didn't mention that I wanted to throw out there, even if the Orioles don't surpass Toronto, let's say they stay tied, or Toronto sweeps Boston and the Orioles only take 2 out of 3 from New York, don't you have a whole lot more confidence now going to Rogers Center for a wild card game than you would have a week ago? I mean, for this team to take 2 out of 3 there.
Well, at this point, Prosperity would say we shouldn't have to do that, right? Prosperity would say they should win more games this weekend than the Blue Jays will.
You hope so.
You hope so, and if that happens, then the game's at Camden Yards on Tuesday.
Sure. But again, just my point is, if you have to go back up there, you've now won 2 out of 3 here in the last week. You should feel better about that. Not easy, but better about that than you would have a few days ago.
Well, that would be Tillman, right? I mean, at this point, barring any weirdness with the schedule, which apparently there's going to be some weirdness with the games this weekend, right? Weather-wise. I think that's sort of, the one thing you could look at is a radar map and figure out some things are going to get shifted around here to some degree. It's going to be one of those kind of weekends for starting pitchers, for relief pitchers, for getting up, for getting down, and with the season on the line and the 40-man, there's going to be some interesting managing of those bullpens and those rotations.
It really is going to be. I mean, the Orioles right now, Gallardo Friday night, Miley Saturday, Bundy last pitched on Sunday, so you would think, depending on if you have a stop-start situation where, let's say, Saturday's game gets delayed and Miley is out after 2 innings because they have an hour rain delay, you would think Dylan Bundy could factor into that equation. It's not official, but they're looking at Gausman starting on Sunday, which makes sense. We know how Gausman has pitched against the Yankees this year, and you assume that game is going to be a situation where the Orioles need to win it, no questions asked. So as you said, that would put Tillman in line to start for the wild card game. And look, we know Chris Tillman hasn't been his pre-injury self entirely, but a gutsy performance against Toronto the other night, and he's a guy who's pitched in some big games before, so you'll have a bullpen behind him. There's no doubt about that. How Buck Showalter will manage a wild card game. That'll be a lot different than a regular season game as far as how long you stick with your starter. But this scheduling thing with the weather, it's going to be very interesting this weekend, and it's. You hope it doesn't become too chaotic for these teams from a standpoint of,
which is perfect because everybody in New England's miserable at this point, even though the team's 3. Let's shift the football here. Luke Jones joining us, of course. Baltimore Luke. These are the week.
Yeah. don't discredit Eli Manning, but
I'm not.
Certainly.
But I think at this point, one's trending up and one's trending down. I would say
that's fair. That's fair. I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, I'm a Derek Carr guy. I think he is a guy who the Raiders got lucky that he fell into their lap when it happened, because he's a guy who easily could have been a first-round pick. But this is a really talented offense. This is a really talented offensive line. We're going to see Kelechi Osemele, who, by the way, has not forgotten about the Ravens.
Yeah, you got anything you want to say about that? I talked to Dennis about that on Thursday, and he was never my favorite guy. In talking to him, for me, it was like nice ball player, great. Offer him real money, but they weren't going to give him more money. They were giving Yanda, and they didn't really want to make him a left tackle at that price either. He did business. They did business. He moved on. I don't get the emotion about it. I mean, it didn't seem like he was all that happy here anyway.
I'll say this, and I heard the whole conference call in which he made the comments. He also said that he has a lot of affection for the organization. He also said he could see a scenario where he'd come back to Baltimore to finish his career toward the end. So as much as he was acknowledging more the hurt. You got to remember, there's a business side, as you just said, and he made a business decision, and the Ravens made a business decision. But there are emotions involved in this. And, Torrey Smith went through the same thing. Now, Torrey Smith didn't necessarily express disenchantment, but I know for a fact that Torrey Smith was really hurt, that the Ravens didn't really make that much of an effort to re-sign him after his final.
But part of this is on Ozzie, and Ozzie being a cold-hearted, purple-blooded, assassin when it comes to these contracts, and that's the way you win, quite frankly. You don't win by giving Paul Kruger or Art Jones or Pernell McPhee or any of these guys special guy money if you don't feel like they're special. And I don't think they didn't think Kelechi Osemele was special. They thought he was like special for $8 million as a guard, not as $12 million as a tackle.
Well, I think they would have been intrigued to see him as a tackle, but they weren't going to pay $50 million for a guy who had only had a few starts at left tackle. So, again, the point being, the Ravens, I think, absolutely made the right decision not paying him the kind of money that Oakland paid him. He was absolutely smart to take that money because it was markedly better than what the Ravens did.
But it wasn't some big shock, dude. This time last year, we looked at it and said, they're not going to have two $10 million guards. They're not,
And again...
And no tackle.
And again, his tone was not one that I hate this organization. They're lowlifes. They treated me poorly. It was. He just acknowledged some hurt and that that the Ravens didn't come close to what Oakland did. But at the same time, he's in Oakland now. He's playing well there.
God bless him. Let him go play well. Just not this week.
Life goes on.
Play well against the Steelers and the Bengals when you play them.
yeah. So so it's a case of he's on a talented offensive line and. He did say he's looking forward to pancaking a few of his former teammates. And, hey, that's fun. I like that kind of talk. Let's have more of that.
I think Timmy Jernigan and Brandon Williams will be saying hello to him at 105 on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's going to be a test for this Ravens defense going up against this Oakland offensive line. So, biggest test that they've had by a long shot to this point.
Well, a great opportunity for the Ravens offense to show off a little bit here. This has been a Raiders defense that has really scuffled to the chagrin of Jack Del Rio. They haven't gotten after the quarterback. Khalil Mack hasn't been the numbers guy you want to see there. And certainly from all of my conversations, and you can hear them all in the Buy a Toyota audio vault at WNST.net. I've talked to at least a half dozen people this week. JT the Brick, Scott Bair, Larry Beal, who ESPN host, who does television out in San Francisco. They're all like the defense has really been a mess, and they're 2-1 in spite of the defense because the offense is explosive. This might be a week that Flacco could put up 3 or 4 touchdown passes, and this team could put 35, 38 points on the board.
It better be. This is the week where it needs to come together. They haven't stopped the run particularly well, and certainly they've had their issues in the secondary, although they played better in week 3, albeit against an underwhelming opponent. So, this is the week where we've had all this talk about the Ravens moving the ball but settling for field goals. They've only had 4 touchdowns in 3 games. You better start scoring some points because I think Oakland is going to score some points. I see this being more of a high-scoring game. Not a knock on the Ravens' defense, but I think this is a really talented offense. So that they're facing. So this is the week where you want to see that offense for the Ravens really take some steps forward. And I'll say this much. If you can't put the running game together a little bit better this week against that front, which I think, Khalil Mack is a hell of a player. And I think you have to be concerned with the status of Ronnie Stanley, the status of Alex Lewis. But
Lewis isn't going to play, right? I mean, let's just call that what it is.
You wouldn't think so. I mean, it's possible he could be cleared and could be good to go. But Stanley dealing with the foot issue, even going back to last week. So that's clearly a concern there, even if he does play. But
what's the lineup look like without them? Jensen left guard, right?
Mm-hmm. And we'll probably see James Hurst at left tackle then, because the reality is, and I've said this to you before, I think their plan, all things being equal, if Stanley, something happens to him, their plan was to shift Alex Lewis outside to left tackle because that's where he played in college.
Sure.
But if he's out too, well, then you kind of have no choice but to go to James Hurst. So I think that's what we would see, and I know fans right now listening are shuddering at the thought of that and thinking back to last year, and I get it, but...
Well, if we're 3-1 on Monday, that might be a reason.
It might be, sure. And to be honest, I mean, even if Stanley plays, Khalil Mack's a heck of a player, and just because he doesn't have any sacks yet doesn't mean you're going to continue to hold him down, meaning opposition. So we'll see how that plays out, but that's something that certainly that could swing this game one way or the other. There's no doubt about that. But Ravens, the goal is clear. This is not a very good defense they're playing. They're playing at home. It's time to score some touchdowns. It's time to put some real points up on the board. I see this game potentially being in the high 20s. So, maybe the first team to 30 wins, and the Ravens certainly, they have the potential to do that. I think we've seen the passing game flash and be able to do that, but you got to finish off drives with touchdowns, not field goals.
Cincinnati gets a win on Thursday night. They move to 2-2, and of course on Sunday night, after the Ravens hopefully defeat the Raiders, we all get to come home and watch the Steelers play at home against Kansas City and hate on the Steelers and all become big Kansas City Chiefs fans as well. It is an interesting weekend all the way around from baseball. The Terps playing as an undefeated team against Purdue on Saturday. We got a whole bunch of stuff on all of that in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault. You can find Luke anytime, anywhere, out on Twitter at Baltimore Luke, as well as at our WNST Twitter. He is Luke at WNST.net. I am Nasty at WNST.net. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on Facebook Live, as well as on our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, anything you miss you can find in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault all weekend long. It is downloadable, podcastable. Listen when you want, where you want, how you want, to what you want. And you can also download that TuneIn radio app. We come in crystal clear. And they listen live from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. And breaking news, if it happens, we talk about injuries, talk about Ronnie Stanley, Alex Lewis, anybody else, the weather over the weekend with the Orioles, rain delays, all of that will happen on the WNST text service. You just have to sign up. It's free of charge. It's spam-free. Comes directly to your phone. 10 years of trust, about 10,000 of you on it. And it's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home and getting you ready for, hopefully, some Orioles ALDS action next weekend. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.